afternoon. My name is Varley and I'm a quilter, and this is my Parrot Quilt. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about the quilt, how I made it, and give you a little bit of an introduction into some videos I've made on how you can make this quilt yourself. I'm grateful to Quiltmania Editions for publishing this as a booklet, and I really hope you enjoy the whole process. So this quilt started off with the central fabric. It's a Sanderson fabric and it dates from about the early 1980s, and it has these wonderful motifs including a parrot, flowers, and the actual fabric. Also, here's a piece of it, but in a blue colourway. Has much bigger emblems as well. But I decided that these really lovely stems and flowers were wonderful and decided to cut it up and make a quilt from it. So this one, I cut the sections and then joined them together and put the bird in the centre, cutting off a bit of his tail. Having made that centre, I then selected about 30 colours from my stash that coordinated with this main fabric and covered 2-inch side 10-point star diamond templates with them and applied them using a pliqué. It really made a very strong visual image, and I didn't want to then compete with it. So the next layer of appliqué out has mainly self-coloured fabrics that are really subtle, low volume fabrics that I appliquéed on quite randomly with lots of different shapes that were very pleasing to me. I had some pentagon flowers with a 1/2-inch pentagon, some ovals, some circles, pointed hearts and curved hearts. Some of the fabrics from the broderie purse in reverse so that they're slightly paler, and I added my initials. Quite early in the design decision-making process, I wanted to have some of these parrots flowing out into the broader quilt. I thought of it as looking up into a tree canopy and seeing a bird there, and I wanted to carry on that visual image. I then put on a border around the frame, and that held all of that appliqué together. There's a lower border that has appliqué birds on. I put my initials because I think it's really important to sign our work. If we're painters, if we were painting a picture, we would sign our picture. And I've also put the date when I made it. Some of these fabrics are 30, 40 years old, others are only a year old. And like historic quilts, we find it very difficult to date something by the fabric used because people used old fabrics they had in their stashes, just like I've done. So by putting the date, it says something about what I was doing in 2018, but also it says something about quilt design at that period. Then beyond the small 1/2-inch chevron border, there's a wider border with a green fabric with blue dots on, and onto that is applied a pentagon border with these lovely 5/8 inch pentagon flowers. The outer border has the corner of the pentagon flowers curving round, and then right on the outside is this absolutely lovely sweeping border. And I think it frames the quilt beautifully, and for that reason I haven't then put a binding on, but I've put a facing on the back that ties it all together so that the appliqué frames the quilt. The quilt is weighted towards the bottom by having a 3-inch strip of chevron fabric below all the appliqué, and that just allows the appliqué to sit. I hand quilted this In fact, almost the entire quilt is done by hand. The only things that are done by machine are applying the 1/2 inch chevron border and putting the main pieces of fabric together and the facing on the edge. Everything else is done by hand. So the quilting has been used to emphasise what I'm trying to say with the applique. Some of it goes around in the ditch, around applique. Some of it goes in lines towards the centre to help draw your eye in. It's very simple quilting. I've used quite small stitches, and I used a wool wadding and quite a lightweight, very soft backing fabric so that it was a pleasure to work with. So this is an introduction to my quilt. To help you with the pattern, I've made some short videos that talk about each of the stages. The first one looks at how I did the centre, but it also talks about how I tacked the work together. I use a lot of tacking stitches. I don't like to use pins because they fall out when I'm on the travel or when I'm on the go, and I'm not hugely keen on glue for applying fabrics that are either pale or light. So it was almost entirely tacked by hand, and the layout stitching to know where the edges are was again done with some hand tacking. So that's the subject of the first video. The second video focuses entirely on this ring of diamonds and how I did the applique. The third one looks at all of these shapes and the infill applique. The fourth looks at how I applied the parrots over the pieces that were machined together and how that came together. The fourth looks at the Pentagon Border and how I made these flowers and how I got them to work on the corners so that there was a really elegant finish. And the final one looks at this scalloped edge and how I did the facing. So I hope that you find those videos really useful. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction, and I wish you all the best with quilting. Thank you.